My brother who stole my wife laughed. No wonder you're still single at 32. I smiled and said, actually, I've been married for 4 years. You just weren't invited. The family photo fell from his hands. Oh, here we go again. Another Thanksgiving dinner from hell, courtesy of the people who supposedly share my DNA. I'm sitting at this mahogany monstrosity of a dining table that probably costs more than my car, staring at the same faces that have been serving me disappointment with a side of judgment for 32 years. The turkey's dry as usual, the conversation's about as warm as a January morning in Chicago, and my dear brother Michael is already 3 glasses deep into Dad's good wine, which means the entertainment portion of our evening is about to kick into high gear. You know that feeling when you're watching a train wreck in slow motion? Yeah, that's me right now, except I'm not just watching. I'm the guy tied to the tracks, and the conductor is my own flesh and blood. Michael's got that smug little smirk plastered across his face, the same one he's been perfecting since we were kids. The one that says, I'm about to drop a verbal bomb that'll leave you scrambling for cover. He's leaning back in his chair like he owns the place, which, let's be honest, he probably will someday, because apparently being a backstabbing snake comes with inheritance perks in this family. So, little brother, he starts, and Jesus Christ, I'm 32 years old, and this jackass is still calling me little brother, like we're still fighting over who gets the last Pop-Tart. Still playing house all by yourself? No wonder you're still single at 32. And there it is, folks. The annual roast of yours truly, served up with all the subtlety of a brick through a window. The whole table goes quiet except for the sound of forks scraping against plates, because apparently watching me squirm is better entertainment than whatever garbage is on TV these days. Mom doesn't even look up from her perfectly portioned sweet potatoes when she chimes in with, well, Michael has a point, sweetheart. At your age, most men have figured out how to keep a woman happy. The word sweetheart drips from her lips like artificial honey. Sweet on the surface, but you know it's fake as hell underneath. Dad just grunts his agreement while sawing through his turkey like he's performing surgery. Real supportive, Pops. Thanks for having my back like always. Why Sister Julia glances up from her phone long enough to shoot me one of those looks that's supposed to pass for sympathy, but really just screams, thank God I'm not the family screw-up. Her husband Brad, and yes, his name is actually Brad, because of course it is, adjusts his designer glasses and nods along like he's got any business having opinions about my life. Dude's been in this family for 3 years and thinks he's qualified to judge me? Please. Then there's Aunt Helen, stirring the pot like it's her damn job. Oh, honey, she coos, reaching across the table to pat my hand with her liver-spotted fingers. There's someone out there for everyone. Even you. Even me. Like I'm some kind of charity case that needs divine intervention to find love. This is my family, ladies and gentlemen. The same people who should have my back are the ones holding the knives, and they've been sharpening them for years. Ever since my first marriage went up in flames. Thanks in large part to Michael's helpful intervention, they've treated me like I'm damaged goods at a discount store. Poor, pathetic, permanently single me, destined to die alone surrounded by takeout containers and regret. For years, I've sat at this table and taken it, smiled through gritted teeth, laughed along with their jokes, pretended their words didn't slice through me like paper cuts. Because that's what you do when you're the family disappointment, right? You grin and bear it. Hope maybe this year will be different. Maybe this time they'll remember that I'm actually a human being with feelings and not just their personal punching bag. But you know what? Not tonight. Tonight, something's different. Maybe it's the way Michael's laughing, throwing his head back like he just told the joke of the century. Maybe it's the way Mom's nodding along like she's proud of her golden boy for putting me in my place. Or maybe it's just that I'm finally tired of being the butt of every family joke, the cautionary tale they tell at dinner parties about what happens when you don't live up to expectations. Michael's still chuckling, and I can see him gearing up for round 2. He's probably got a whole arsenal of zingers locked and loaded, ready to remind everyone why he's the success story and I'm the footnote. But as I sit here, watching his performance, something inside me snaps into place. Not breaks. Snaps into place. Like a puzzle piece finally finding where it belongs. That I feel this smile spreading across my face, slow and steady. Not the fake, uncomfortable smile I usually paste on during these family gatherings, but something real. Something that comes from a place these people have never been allowed to see. Michael notices the smile first, and for just a second, I catch something that looks almost like uncertainty flicker across his features. Good. Let him wonder what I'm thinking. Let him sweat a little. Actually, I say, and my voice comes out calmer than I expected, steadier than it's been in years at one of these things. I've been married for 4 years. The effect is immediate and absolutely beautiful. It's like someone hit the pause button on the entire universe. Michael's glass stops halfway to his mouth. Mom's fork freezes in midair with a piece of stuffing dangling from it, and Dad actually looks up from his surgical procedure on the turkey. Even Brad stops scrolling through whatever incredibly important email he was reading. You just weren't invited, I add, because apparently I'm feeling generous with the truth bombs tonight, and that's when it happens. The family photo that's been sitting on the side table, the one from last Christmas where everyone's wearing matching red sweaters and fake smiles, slides right out of Michael's suddenly slack fingers and crashes to the floor. The glass doesn't just crack. It completely shatters, sending tiny fragments scattering across Mom's precious hardwood floors like confetti at the world's most awkward celebration. The silence that follows is so complete, so absolute, that I can actually hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Tick, 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 marking the seconds as my family's entire narrative about my sad, lonely existence crumbles right along with that picture frame. This is it. This is the moment everything changes. Looking at their shell-shocked faces right now, watching Mom's mouth hanging open like she's trying to catch flies, I can't help but think about how we got here. How this exact moment, me finally having the upper hand for once in my goddamn life, was basically inevitable when you consider the absolute masterpiece of dysfunction that was my childhood. See, here's the thing about being the oldest kid in a family that treats you like a rough draft. You get to watch them perfect their parenting skills on your younger siblings while you're still dealing with the amateur hour version. I was what Dad used to call their practice son. And yeah, he actually said that out loud, multiple times, like it was some kind of hilarious family joke instead of psychological warfare disguised as humor. We had to make all our mistakes on you, Mom would say with that little laugh that was supposed to make it sound cute and harmless, so we could get it right with Michael and Julia. Real fucking heartwarming, right? Nothing builds a kid's self-esteem quite like being told you're essentially a beta test for the real children they actually wanted. Michael's sitting there now, still frozen with that wine glass in his hand, and I'm remembering all those times he got the praise that should have been mine. Like when I brought home straight A's in 7th grade. Not a single B in sight, mind you, and Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. Just grunted something about finally applying yourself, and went back to reading about whatever crisis was happening in the stock market that day. But when Michael managed to scrape together a B+ average 2 years later, holy shit, you'd have thought the kid had just discovered the cure for cancer. Dad took him out for ice cream. Mom called all her friends to brag, and they stuck his report card on the refrigerator like it was the Mona Lisa. And don't even get me started on the scholarship situation. I worked my ass off senior year, stayed up until 3 in the morning studying for the SATs, wrote essay after essay until my fingers were cramped and my brain felt like mush. When that acceptance letter came with a full ride to state, I was so proud I could barely contain myself. This was it, I thought. This was finally my moment to shine, to show them I wasn't just the practice kid anymore. You know what Mom's first response was? That's wonderful, sweetheart. But why didn't you apply to law school like Michael's planning to? You know how much more stable that would be. Michael wasn't even in high school yet, and she was already comparing my actual achievements to his hypothetical future ones. The kid was still figuring out algebra, and somehow his imaginary legal career was more impressive than my very real academic success. That's some next-level mental gymnastics right there. But hey, when you're determined to see one kid as the golden child and the other as the consolation prize, I guess logic doesn't really enter into it. But the real kicker, the moment that should have taught me everything I needed to know about where I stood in this family's pecking order, came when my first marriage imploded. And by imploded, I mean when Michael, my own fucking brother, decided to play the role of concerned sibling by swooping in to comfort my wife during a rough patch we were going through. Now, when I say rough patch, I'm talking about normal married couple stuff. We were arguing about money, about whose turn it was to do the dishes, about whether we should get a dog. Regular domestic disagreements that every couple has when they're figuring out how to build a life together. Nothing earth-shattering, Nothing that couldn't be worked through with some honest communication and maybe a few sessions of couples therapy. But apparently, Michael saw an opportunity. While I was busting my ass at work, pulling double shifts to try and get us ahead financially, he was playing the role of the sympathetic ear, the understanding friend, the shoulder to cry on. And what do you know? That shoulder to cry on turned into something a whole lot more horizontal, if you catch my drift, when I found out. And trust me, finding your wife and your brother together is exactly as devastating as every country song makes it sound. I expected my family to be horrified. I mean, this was betrayal on a biblical level, right? Brother sleeping with brother's wife? That's some serious Old Testament drama right there. But here's where it gets really good. Instead of outrage, instead of taking my side, instead of showing even the slightest bit of concern for the fact that their son and brother had just been completely destroyed by the two people he trusted most in the world, you know what they said. Well, at least Michael stepped up. Stepped up, like he was some kind of hero swooping in to rescue a damsel in distress, instead of a snake who couldn't keep his hands off his own brother's wife. They painted him as the responsible one, the mature one, the one who knew how to handle a woman properly. And me? I was the failure who couldn't even keep his own wife satisfied. Dad actually pulled me aside at the divorce proceedings, to tell me I should be grateful that Michael was willing to take care of her. She needs someone stable, he said, like I was some kind of deadbeat who'd been neglecting his responsibilities instead of a guy who'd just had his entire world ripped apart by the two people he loved most. Mom was even worse. She spent weeks after the divorce telling anyone who'd listen about how Michael saved that poor girl from a bad situation. A bad situation. That's what 26 years of being her son had been reduced to. A bad situation that her golden boy had heroically resolved by stealing my wife. And Julia? She just stayed quiet, which in this family is basically the same as picking a side. Her silence was approval. Her refusal to call out the obvious injustice was complicity. She let them rewrite history in real time, turning my betrayal into Michael's triumph, my devastation into his opportunity to shine. That's when I learned the most important lesson of my life. In this family, I would always be expendable. No matter what I achieved, no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I sacrificed, I would always be the practice son, the rough draft, the mistake they had to make before they figured out how to do it right. So I stopped trying to be the son they wanted and started being the man I needed to be. I built a life they knew nothing about, found love they couldn't touch, created happiness they couldn't poison. And tonight, sitting here watching them process the fact that I've been married for 4 years without their knowledge or approval, I finally get to see what victory looks like. It looks like Michael's face when reality hits him like a freight train. It looks like Mom's perfectly applied makeup starting to run as the tears she's trying to hold back threaten to spill over. It looks like Dad's confused expression as he tries to figure out how his practice son managed to succeed without his guidance. This is what winning feels like when you've spent your whole life losing. You want to know about the woman who changed everything? The one who saw something in me that my own blood relatives missed for 32 years? Let me paint you a picture of Clara that'll make your hearts grow 3 sizes. Assuming any of you still have hearts left after years of practicing emotional warfare on each other. 4 years ago, I was volunteering at a Habitat for Humanity rebuild project. Yeah, that's right. Volunteering. I know. Shocking that the family disappointment would actually spend his weekends helping people instead of wallowing in self-pity like you all assumed I was doing. There'd been a house fire that wiped out an entire block in the Riverside neighborhood, and those of us with functioning consciences were spending our Saturdays swinging hammers and hauling lumber to help families get back on their feet. It was one of those crisp October mornings where the air bites just enough to wake you up, but doesn't quite cross the line into freeze-your-ass-off territory. I was wrestling with a particularly stubborn piece of siding when I heard this laugh. Not a polite little giggle or one of those fake social laughs people use at cocktail parties. This was the real deal. Pure, unfiltered joy bubbling up from somewhere deep and genuine. I looked up, and there she was. Clara Martinez, though I didn't know her name yet. She was kneeling next to a little girl who couldn't have been more than 6, both of them covered in paint splatters, working on what was supposed to be a white picket fence, but looked more like a rainbow explosion. The kid had somehow managed to get more paint on herself than the fence, and Clara was laughing like it was the most beautiful masterpiece she'd ever seen. "I think Van Gogh would be jealous," Clara was saying to the little girl, her voice carrying that special kind of warmth that elementary school teachers perfect, the kind that makes you feel like whatever you're doing is the most important thing in the world. And that's when it hit me. This woman, this complete stranger, was having more genuine fun helping rebuild someone else's life than I'd had with my own family in years. She wasn't there for the photo op or the tax write-off, or because her social circle expected it. She was there because it mattered to her, because making a difference in someone else's world was how she chose to spend her free time, that I must have been staring like an idiot, because she caught me looking and flashed this grin that could have powered half the city. "You gonna stand there admiring my artistic supervision, or are you gonna grab a brush and help us create a masterpiece?" Most women, when they're covered in paint and dealing with a hyperactive 6-year-old, probably don't want some random guy gawking at them from across the yard. But Clara? She just rolled with it, made it into a joke, invited me into her world like we'd been friends for years. That I dropped my siding. Literally dropped it, smooth move there, Romeo, and walked over. "I should probably warn you. I'm more of a paint-the-wall one color and call it done kind of guy. My artistic vision peaks at stick figures." "Perfect," she said, handing me a brush loaded with blue paint. "Emma here is teaching me that art isn't about perfection. It's about joy. Right, Em?" The little girl nodded so enthusiastically I was worried she might give herself whiplash. "Miss Clara says there's no wrong way to make something beautiful." Miss Clara. Even then, 5 minutes into meeting her, I could tell this wasn't just some weekend warrior playing at being helpful. This was someone who lived this stuff, who made kindness her full-time job. We spent the next 3 hours turning that fence into what looked like a unicorn had exploded all over it. And I learned more about Clara Martinez in those 3 hours than I'd learned about myself in the previous 3 years. She taught 3rd grade at Roosevelt Elementary, the kind of school where half the kids qualified for free lunch and the other half were one paycheck away from qualifying. She'd been there for 6 years, ever since graduating from college, because she believed every kid deserved a teacher who gave a damn. She told me about staying late to help Marcus with his reading, about spending her own money on supplies because the school budget was tighter than a pickle jar, about the wall in her classroom covered with thank you notes from former students who'd gone on to high school and still remembered the teacher who believed in them when nobody else did. But here's the thing that really got me. She didn't tell me any of this to impress me. She wasn't name-dropping her good deeds or fishing for compliments. She talked about her kids the way other people talk about their families, with this fierce protective love that made it clear teaching wasn't just her job, it was her calling. When Emma's mom came to pick her up, the little girl hugged Clara like she was saying goodbye to her best friend. "Will you be here next Saturday, Miss Clara?" "Wouldn't miss it, sweetheart. We've got to finish our rainbow masterpiece." After Emma left, Clara and I found ourselves sitting on a pile of lumber, sharing a thermos of coffee that tasted like it had been made in someone's garage, but felt like the finest vintage when you're tired and covered in paint, and talking to someone who actually listens when you speak. That's when I made the mistake of mentioning my family. Not the whole sordid story. I wasn't quite ready to unload that particular bag of dysfunction on someone I'd just met, but just enough to explain why I was spending my Saturday mornings with strangers instead of at some family brunch. "They sound complicated," she said after I gave her the sanitized version of my childhood as the practice son. "That's a diplomatic way of putting it." "I'm a teacher," she laughed. "Diplomacy is half my job. The other half is convincing 8-year-olds that learning multiplication tables is more fun than picking their noses." "Which half am I?" She tilted her head, studying me with those dark eyes that seemed to see straight through all the walls I'd spent years building. "Neither. You're the part of my day that doesn't require diplomacy or convincing. You're just easy." "Easy? When was the last time anyone in my family had described me as easy? I was the complicated one, the difficult one, the one who couldn't figure out how to make them happy no matter how hard I tried." But to Clara, after 3 hours of painting fences and talking about everything and nothing, I was easy. That night, I went home to my apartment and couldn't stop thinking about her laugh. About the way she treated that little girl like her opinion on fence painting was the most important thing in the world. About how she'd managed to make volunteer work feel like the highlight of my week instead of just something to fill the empty Saturday hours that I didn't know it then, But that October morning was the last day I'd wake up as the man my family had convinced me I was. The failure, the disappointment, the practiced son who never quite measured up. Because Clara Martinez had seen something different in me, something worth getting to know, and for the first time in my adult life, I was curious to find out what that might be. You want to know about our wedding? The one none of you were invited to? Well, buckle up, buttercups, because I'm about to describe something so foreign to your experience that you might need subtitles. It's called a celebration where people actually love and support each other. Revolutionary concept though that may be. Picture this. No country club ballroom with crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's cars. No 7-course dinner that tastes like cardboard because it was prepared for 300 people by a catering company that specializes in making everything look pretty and taste like absolutely nothing. No stuffy string quartet playing the same boring classical pieces that have been putting wedding guests to sleep since the dawn of time. Instead, we got married at Miller's Lake, about 2 hours outside the city, at this little spot where Clara used to go camping with her family when she was a kid. You know, the kind of place where you can actually hear yourself think because it's not located next to a major highway or underneath the flight path of every commercial airline on the East Coast. The venue, if you want to call it that, was basically a clearing in the woods with a view of the water that would make those fancy wedding photographers weep with envy. We're talking about the kind of natural beauty that doesn't need $10,000 worth of floral arrangements to look stunning. Just pine trees and lake water and the kind of sunset that reminds you why people write poetry about nature instead of about hotel conference rooms. Clara's dad, Roberto, spent 3 weeks building us an arch out of birch branches he cut himself. Not because we couldn't afford to rent one of those generic white monstrosities from the wedding supply company, but because he wanted to give us something that actually meant something. Every branch was placed with intention, every curve shaped by hands that have been building things for 40 years and know the difference between craftsmanship and mass production. That we strung lights through the trees. Not those harsh LED spotlights that make everyone look like they're being interrogated by the FBI, but soft white Christmas lights that cast everything in a warm glow that made people want to stay close and talk quietly and actually enjoy each other's company. Revolutionary stuff, I know. The guest list? 43 people. Not because we're antisocial or because we couldn't afford to feed more people, but because we wanted every single person there to actually give a damn about our happiness. Crazy concept, right? Inviting people to your wedding because you love them and they love you back, instead of because social obligation demands it or because you're trying to show off your connections. My best friend Jake stood as my best man, the same guy who helped me move out of my apartment after the divorce, who listened to me rage and cry and question everything I thought I knew about myself, and who never once suggested that maybe I deserved what happened. Clara's sister Maria was her maid of honor, and her kids served as flower girl and ring bearer, which basically meant they sprinkled rose petals everywhere and forgot to bring the rings at the crucial moment, causing a 5-minute panic that ended with everyone laughing instead of anyone getting bent out of shape about the deviation from the sacred wedding timeline, that we wore what we wanted to wear. I had on a navy suit that actually fit me properly, not some rental tuxedo that makes every guy look like a penguin who got lost on his way to a funeral. Clara wore her grandmother's wedding dress that her mom had altered to fit her perfectly, with these little pearl buttons down the back that caught the light every time she moved. She looked like something out of a fairy tale, but the good kind where the princess is also smart and funny and doesn't need rescuing from anything except maybe a lifetime of dealing with my family's bullshit. The ceremony itself lasted about 20 minutes, which is apparently just long enough to say the important stuff without putting anyone to sleep or making them wish they'd brought a flask. We wrote our own vows, because apparently when you actually know and love the person you're marrying, you can come up with your own words to describe how you feel about them. Who knew? I promised her I'd always choose her, even when choosing her meant walking away from people who should have had my back, but didn't. She promised me she'd never make me choose between her love and their approval, because real love doesn't come with ultimatums. We promised each other we'd build something better than what we'd come from, something worthy of the kids we hoped to have someday. When it came time for the kiss, the whole crowd erupted like we'd just won the World Series. Not polite golf claps or the kind of forced enthusiasm you get at weddings where half the guests are only there for the open bar, but genuine celebration from people who were genuinely happy for us. The reception was exactly what you'd expect from people who care more about joy than about impressing anyone. Clara's mom and her aunts had been cooking for days, making all the dishes that actually meant something to their family instead of whatever fancy crap the catering company was pushing that month. We're talking about food made with love, seasoned with tradition, served by people who wanted to feed us well because they cared about us. Roberto's band. Yeah, Clara's dad plays guitar in a mariachi group because apparently her family believes in actually enjoying life, provided the entertainment. No DJ playing the same tired playlist that's been recycling through wedding receptions since the 90s. No forced line dancing that makes everyone feel awkward. Just music that made people want to move, to sing along, to grab someone and dance like nobody was watching. And you know what the best part was? Nobody was watching. Nobody was judging. Nobody was keeping score of who looked better or who spent more money or whose dress was more expensive or whose family had better connections. People were just there to celebrate love, to eat good food, to dance until their feet hurt, and to be genuinely happy for two people who had found something worth celebrating. We danced barefoot in the grass as the sun went down, surrounded by the people who had chosen to love us without conditions or expectations. When Clara's grandmother grabbed me for a dance and whispered in my ear that I was good for her granddaughter, I almost lost it right there. When Jake made a toast about how he'd never seen me smile the way I smiled when I talked about Clara, I did lose it. By midnight, we were sitting by the lake with our closest friends, still in our wedding clothes, but with our shoes kicked off, sharing stories and watching the stars reflect on the water. Clara fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, and I sat there thinking about how this was what happiness actually felt like. No drama. No competition. No one trying to prove they were better than anyone else. Just love, celebrated by people who understood what love actually means. That's what you missed when you weren't invited to our wedding. Not just a party, but a glimpse into what family can be when it's chosen instead of endured. Oh, you want to know why I kept my marriage a secret? Why I didn't send out fancy invitations with gold embossing and RSVP cards? Why I didn't call you all up to share the good news and invite you to be part of the most important day of my life? Well, let me break it down for you in terms even you can understand. Let's start with a little thought experiment, shall we? Picture this scenario. It's 4 years ago, and I walk into one of our delightful family gatherings. You know, the kind where I usually leave feeling like I've been through an emotional blender, and I announce that I've met someone. Someone special. Someone I'm thinking about marrying. Can you imagine what would have happened next? Because I can, with crystal clear, high-definition accuracy, because I've been watching you people operate for 32 years, and your playbook never changes. First, Mom would have gone into full interrogation mode. What's her background? Where did she go to school? What does her father do for a living? Because apparently, in this family, a woman's worth is determined by her pedigree, like she's a fucking show dog instead of a human being with her own accomplishments and character. When I told you she was an elementary school teacher, a public school teacher, no less, the collective eye-rolling would have registered on the Richter scale. Oh, how noble, Mom would have said with that special tone she reserves for things she considers beneath her social station. I suppose someone has to do that job. Dad would have immediately started calculating her earning potential like she was a stock he was considering for his portfolio. Teachers don't make much money, son. You sure you want to tie yourself to that kind of financial limitation? Because God forbid I marry someone for love instead of their ability to contribute to the family's net worth. And Michael? Oh, Michael would have had a field day. He'd have made sure to mention his surgeon wife at every possible opportunity, comparing Clara's salary to Dr. Stephanie's 6-figure income, her state school education to Stephanie's Ivy League credentials, her modest apartment to their sprawling suburban mansion. Every conversation would have become a contest, and Clara would have been the unwitting contestant in a game she never agreed to play. You want to know the real kicker? I actually started to tell you once. It was at Easter dinner 2 years ago, right after Clara and I got engaged. I was feeling optimistic, maybe even a little hopeful that this time might be different. Maybe this time, my family would surprise me and actually be happy for my happiness. I got as far as, I've been seeing someone, before Julia cut me off to show everyone pictures of her latest vacation to the Hamptons. Just steamrolled right over me like my news was about as interesting as a weather report. And when I tried to bring it up again later, Aunt Helen patted my arm and said, "That's nice, dear. Don't get your hopes up too high, though. You know how these things usually go for you. How these things usually go for me. Like I was cursed or something, destined to fail at love because I'd already proven I couldn't handle it the first time around. Never mind that my first marriage failed because my own brother decided to play homewrecker. In their version of history, I was just fundamentally flawed, incapable of making a relationship work. So I made a decision that night. I decided that Clara Martinez, this incredible, kind, brilliant woman who saw something in me worth loving, deserved better than to be dissected by a family of emotional vultures. She deserved better than to have her every choice questioned, her background analyzed, her worthiness debated over Sunday brunch like she was applying for membership to some exclusive club. You want to know what would have happened if I'd brought Clara around? You would have done what you always do. You would have found ways to make her feel small. Not overtly, not in ways that would make you look like the bad guys. You're too sophisticated for outright cruelty. No, you would have used your specialty, death by 1,000 paper cuts. Mom would have made subtle comments about Clara's clothes, her hair, her makeup. Oh, that's an interesting choice, she'd say about Clara's perfectly normal, perfectly appropriate outfit, in that tone that makes interesting sound like a polite way of saying tragic. Dad would have asked her loaded questions designed to highlight the differences between her world and ours. So, teaching must be rewarding. Do you ever think about doing something more challenging? Because apparently dedicating your life to educating children is somehow less challenging than whatever the hell Dad thinks is worthy of respect. Julia would have been sweet as pie to Clara's face and then whispered her critiques to anyone who'd listen. She seems nice, but don't you think she's a little ordinary? I mean, for someone like him. Even my failures have to meet certain standards in this family. And Michael? Michael would have seen Clara as a threat to his position as the family golden boy. He would have made sure to establish dominance, to put her in her place, to remind everyone, especially me, that his wife was the superior choice. Because that's what Michael does. He competes, even when there's no competition. But here's the thing that really gets me. You wouldn't have done any of this out of malice. You would have genuinely believed you were helping me, protecting me from making another mistake. In your twisted logic, tearing down the woman I love would have been an act of love, saving me from future heartbreak by ensuring I had plenty of present heartbreak instead. That's why I kept Clara away from you. Not because I was ashamed of her. Christ, I've never been prouder of anything in my life than being married to that woman. I kept her away because I was ashamed of you. Because I knew that bringing her into this family would be like bringing a beautiful butterfly into a room full of people with magnifying glasses, all of them ready to examine her wings until they fell apart. So when Michael sits there with his smug little smirk and calls this deception, like I've somehow wronged him by protecting my wife from his toxicity, I want to laugh. The only deception here was me pretending for 32 years that you people were actually my family, that your opinions mattered, that your approval was something worth seeking. I built a life without you because I finally understood that some people don't deserve access to your happiness. Some people will take the most beautiful thing in your world and find ways to make it ugly. And the only way to protect what you love is to keep it far away from people who don't know how to love properly. Clara has never had to doubt her worth because of something one of you said. She's never had to question whether she's good enough, smart enough, successful enough to deserve love. And that's exactly how I wanted it. That's why you weren't invited to our wedding. That's why you didn't know about our marriage. Because some things are too precious to risk, and my life with Clara is one of them. You want to know about Clara? Really know about her? Because I can see it in your faces right now. You're already trying to figure out what's wrong with her, aren't you? What kind of woman would marry the family screw-up without meeting his family first? What red flags are you missing? What's her angle? Well, let me paint you a picture of the woman you'll never deserve to meet, and maybe you'll start to understand why I chose to protect her from this circus you call a family. Clara wakes up every morning at 5:30, not because she has to, but because she wants to. She uses that extra hour before school to write little notes for her students. Not the generic, good job stickers that most teachers slap on homework, but actual personalized messages. Miguel, I loved how you helped Sarah with her math yesterday. That's what kindness looks like. Emma, your story about your cat made me smile all day. Keep writing. 28 kids in her class, 28 individual notes, every single day. You think that sounds ordinary? Let me tell you what ordinary looks like in most schools. Ordinary is teachers who check out mentally at 3 o'clock, who see kids as problems to manage instead of people to nurture, who count down the days until summer vacation like they're serving prison sentences. Clara? She stays until 6 most nights, tutoring kids whose parents work 2 jobs and can't afford help, creating lesson plans that actually engage 8-year-olds instead of just filling time until the bell rings. Last month, she spent her entire weekend at Home Depot, using her own money to buy supplies for a reading corner in her classroom. Not because the school budget required it, though it did, but because she wanted her kids to have a space that felt magical, where reading wasn't just another assignment, but an adventure. She painted murals on the walls, built little reading nooks with soft pillows and warm lighting, created a place where kids who've never owned a book in their lives suddenly can't wait to turn the next page. And here's the part that would absolutely blow your collective minds. She doesn't do any of this for recognition. She doesn't post about it on social media, doesn't talk about it at dinner parties, doesn't use her good deeds as conversation starters at cocktail events. She does it because she believes every kid deserves a teacher who gives a damn, and she's willing to be that teacher even when nobody's watching. Remember Marcus, the kid I mentioned who was struggling with reading? When Clara started working with him, he was reading at a kindergarten level in 3rd grade. His mom worked nights at the hospital, his dad had been deployed overseas for 8 months, and this 8-year-old was basically raising his little sister while trying to keep up with schoolwork that might as well have been written in hieroglyphics. Most teachers would have passed him along to the special education team, labeled him as someone else's problem, moved on to the kids who were easier to help. Clara? She saw potential where everyone else saw problems. She stayed with him every day after school, broke down reading into bite-sized pieces he could handle, celebrated every tiny victory like he'd just won the Nobel Prize. 6 months later, Marcus was reading at grade level. But more than that, he was reading for pleasure. This kid who used to hate school, who thought he was stupid because letters got jumbled in his brain, was checking out chapter books from the library and reading them to his little sister at bedtime. And when he wrote Clara a thank you note that said, "Miss Martinez, you made me not stupid anymore," she cried for 20 minutes in her car after school. That's who Clara is. She takes kids who've been written off by everyone else and shows them they're worth investing in. She spends her Saturday mornings at the shelter, reading to kids whose families are temporarily homeless, because she knows that just because your world has been turned upside down doesn't mean you should lose access to stories and wonder and imagination. But let me tell you about the Clara you'd never get to see if you met her, because she'd be too busy protecting herself from your judgment to let you see who she really is. You'd meet the polite version, the one who smiles and nods and doesn't share the parts of herself that matter most, because she can sense when people are looking for reasons to dismiss her. You'd miss the woman who comes home from parent-teacher conferences and cries because she has to tell another mom that her son is struggling and they need to consider testing for learning disabilities, knowing that conversation will cost that family money they don't have and stress they can't afford. You'd miss the woman who spends her summer vacation taking graduate courses, not to make more money but to be better at her job, to learn new ways to reach kids who learn differently, to stay current on research that might help her understand why some students shut down when others thrived. You'd miss the woman who knows the names of all her students' siblings, who remembers that Thursday is picture day and makes sure the kids whose families can't afford the photo packages still get their pictures taken, who keeps a stash of granola bars in her desk because some of her students don't eat breakfast and some don't eat lunch, and education is pretty damn hard when you're hungry. When Michael sits there with his surgeon wife and makes subtle comparisons about income and status, what he's really saying is that saving lives in an operating room is more valuable than shaping them in a classroom. And yeah, Dr. Stephanie does important work. I'm not diminishing that. But Clara? Clara is building the foundation that makes everything else possible. She's teaching kids to think critically, to read with comprehension, to believe they're capable of learning anything they set their minds to do. She's the teacher who will make the difference between a kid dropping out of high school and becoming a doctor themselves. She's the adult who shows up consistently in children's lives when other adults have let them down. She's the person who sees potential in places where other people see problems. And here's what would really piss you off if you knew. Clara's kids worship her. Not because she's easy on them or because she lets them get away with anything, but because she expects excellence from them, and then gives them every tool they need to achieve it. Former students come back to visit her years later, bringing their high school diplomas, their college acceptance letters, their wedding invitations, because she was the teacher who made them believe they could accomplish those things. That's the woman I married. Not someone ordinary, not someone settling, not someone who couldn't do better. Someone extraordinary who chooses to make the world better 1 8-year-old at a time. Someone who saw something in me worth loving when my own family couldn't be bothered to look. When you sit there trying to figure out what's wrong with her, what you're really asking is what's wrong with me that someone like her would choose me. And the answer is nothing. For the first time in my life, absolutely nothing. You know what? I wasn't planning to drop this particular bomb tonight. I was going to stick with the marriage revelation, watch you all process that earth-shattering news that I've actually been capable of maintaining a healthy relationship for 4 years, and call it a successful evening of family dysfunction. But sitting here, watching Michael's face cycle through confusion, anger, and what might actually be the beginning of respect, I realize there's one more truth that needs to come out. Clara is pregnant. The words hang in the air like smoke from a firework, and I swear I can actually see the moment each of you processes what I just said. Mom's fork clatters against her plate, the same fork that was frozen in midair 5 minutes ago when I announced I was married. Dad's eyes go wide behind his reading glasses, the ones he pretends he doesn't need, but absolutely cannot function without. Julia's phone finally gets her full attention as she looks up from whatever earth-shattering social media crisis was demanding her focus. But it's Michael's reaction that really gets me. For the first time in our entire adult lives, my little brother. And yeah, I'm going to call him that now because suddenly I feel like the older, wiser, more successful one looks completely and utterly speechless. His mouth opens, closes, opens again like a fish gasping for air. The wine glass in his hand tilts dangerously, and for a second I think he might actually drop it and complete the matched set with that picture frame on the floor. 12 weeks. I continue, because apparently I'm feeling generous with the details tonight. We had our first ultrasound last Tuesday. Everything looks perfect. Heart rate is strong. All the measurements are right on track. Clara's feeling good. Well, except for the morning sickness. But that's actually a positive sign according to Dr. Peterson. I pause, letting that sink in. Dr. Peterson, not some clinic doctor or whoever takes our insurance, but the same obstetrician who delivered half the babies in this city's upper crust. Because apparently when you marry someone who actually values quality healthcare over status symbols, you end up with better medical care than people who choose doctors based on which country club they belong to. Due date is April 15th. I add, watching Mom's face cycle through a dozen different emotions in the span of 30 seconds. Tax day. Clara jokes that our kid is already going to be practical about money. Aunt Helen makes this little choking sound, like she's trying to process the concept of me becoming a father, and her brain is just refusing to compute. Pregnant, she finally manages, and the word comes out like she's speaking a foreign language she learned in high school, but never actually expected to use. That's generally how babies happen, Aunt Helen. When a man and a woman love each other very much. I let the sentence trail off with a grin, because apparently being a smartass runs in the family, and I might as well embrace my heritage. But here's the thing that's really beautiful about this moment. For the first time in my adult life, I'm sharing genuinely good news with my family. Not asking for approval, not seeking validation, not hoping they'll finally see me as worthy of their attention. Just sharing the best thing that's ever happened to me with the people who are supposed to care about my happiness. And they have no idea how to handle it. Mom's the first to find her voice, though it comes out smaller and shakier than I've heard it in years. A baby, she whispers, and there's something in her tone that almost sounds like wonder. You're going to be a father. Yeah, I am. And saying it out loud to them, seeing the reality of it register on their faces, makes it feel even more real than all the ultrasound appointments and prenatal vitamins and late-night conversations about names and nursery themes. Clara's family is over the moon about it. Her mom's already started crocheting blankets, her dad's building a crib from scratch, and her sister's kids are convinced they're going to be the best cousins in the history of cousinhood. I watch that land like a physical blow. Clara's family is excited. Clara's family is involved. Clara's family gets to be part of this incredible journey while my family sits here learning about it after the fact. relegated to the status of distant observers instead of active participants. Her parents know, Dad asks, and there's something in his voice that might actually be hurt. Good. Let him sit with that for a while. They've known since week 6. We wanted to wait until the second trimester to tell extended family, but Clara's parents have been involved from the beginning. Roberto's been researching the best car seats for months, and Maria already has a college fund started. They're treating this pregnancy like the miracle it is. Julia finally speaks up, her voice careful and measured in that way that means she's trying very hard not to say something that will make this situation worse. Are you happy about it? The baby, I mean. Are we happy about it? Jesus Christ, what kind of question is that? Like maybe Clara and I accidentally stumbled into parenthood, and we're just making the best of a bad situation. Julia, I've never been happier about anything in my entire life. We've been trying for 8 months. This baby isn't an accident or a surprise. It's the answer to every prayer we didn't even know we were praying. Clara glows when she talks about becoming a mom. She's already started talking to the baby every night, reading its stories, playing it music. We're not just having a baby, we're creating a family. And that's when it hits them. I can see it in their faces. We're creating a family, not joining their family, not asking to be welcomed back into their family, but creating our own family. A family where love isn't conditional, where acceptance doesn't come with terms and conditions, where children are celebrated instead of compared to. Mom's makeup is definitely running now, and she's not even trying to hide it anymore. We could have helped, she says quietly. With the pregnancy, with preparations, with everything. How? The question comes out sharper than I intended, but I'm past the point of protecting anyone's feelings. How exactly would you have helped? By criticizing Clara's prenatal care choices? By questioning whether we're financially ready? By making subtle comments about how young mothers today don't know how to do things properly? By comparing our pregnancy to Michael and Stephanie's hypothetical future pregnancy that will undoubtedly be more successful and better planned? The silence that follows is deafening, because we all know that's exactly what would have happened. They would have found ways to make even this the most joyful, life-affirming experience of my adult life, about them, about their opinions, about their standards and expectations. This baby is going to be born into joy, I continue, into a family that celebrates every milestone, that sees potential instead of problems, that believes love is the most important thing you can give a child. And Clara's family has already proven they know how to do that. Our child will grow up knowing they're wanted, knowing they're cherished, knowing they're enough exactly as they are. Everything I never had, everything I spent 32 years trying to earn from people who were never going to give it freely, that's the gift Clara and I are giving our baby. Unconditional love from day one. You want to know what real family looks like? Let me tell you about Thanksgiving at the Martinez house. Because apparently you people have forgotten what it means to actually enjoy each other's company instead of just tolerating it for the sake of tradition and social media posts. Picture this. 23 people crammed into a house that was built for maybe 10. And nobody's complaining about the lack of elbow room because they're too busy laughing at Roberto's stories about his latest construction project going sideways. Clara's mom, Elena, has been cooking for 3 days straight. Not because she has to impress anyone or because Martha Stewart is judging her table setting, but because feeding people well is how she shows love, and she's got a lot of love to give. The kitchen is pure chaos in the best possible way. Elena's got 3 different pots going on the stove. Clara and her sister Maria are arguing about the proper way to mash sweet potatoes, and Roberto's sneaking tastes of everything while pretending he's just checking the seasoning. The kids are underfoot, allegedly helping but mostly just getting covered in flour and making everyone laugh with their running commentary on why Grandma's cooking smells better than anything they've ever experienced. And here's the kicker. I've had a permanent seat at that table for 4 years now. Not as Clara's boyfriend who they're politely tolerating until he hopefully goes away, not as the outsider they're trying to figure out how to include, but as family. As Elena's adopted son, as Roberto's extra set of hands for projects, as Uncle Danny to Maria's kids who've never known a holiday without me there. The first time Clara brought me home for Thanksgiving, I was nervous as hell. I mean, I'd just gotten out of the disaster that was my first marriage, I was gun-shy about family dynamics in general, and I had no idea how to act around people who actually seemed to enjoy spending time together. I showed up with flowers for Elena and a bottle of wine for Roberto, standard guest protocol, right? Roberto took one look at the wine, laughed, and handed me a beer. Save the fancy stuff for people you're trying to impress, he said. Here, your family. Family gets the good beer and the comfortable chairs. Elena hugged me like she'd known me for years, immediately put me to work peeling potatoes, and spent the next hour telling me embarrassing stories about Clara's childhood while Clara protested from across the kitchen. Within 2 hours, I felt more at home in that crowded, chaotic house than I'd ever felt in 30 years of family gatherings at the place I grew up. That first dinner, Maria's oldest kid, Diego, was 7 and going through that phase where he asks a million questions about everything. Uncle Danny, he said. And yeah, he started calling me Uncle Danny after knowing me for exactly 4 hours. Why don't you have any kids yet? Before I could figure out how to answer that loaded question, Elena jumped in. Some people take longer to find the right person to have babies with, she said simply. Uncle Danny was waiting for Aunt Clara, and now they can think about babies when they're ready. No judgment, no pressure, no subtle hints about biological clocks or suggestions that maybe I was defective somehow. Just acceptance that people's lives unfold at different paces, and that's perfectly okay. Compare that to the conversation we had at this very table 2 years ago, when Aunt Helen spent 20 minutes explaining why men my age who don't have children yet are probably not father material, while the rest of you nodded along like she was sharing profound wisdom instead of just being a judgmental old the Martinez house. When Elena found out Clara and I were trying to get pregnant, she didn't launch into a lecture about proper nutrition or critique our timing or suggest we wait until we were more financially stable. She just smiled, hugged us both, and said, when God is ready to bless you with a baby, we'll be ready to love that baby. When we told them about the pregnancy last month, Roberto actually cried. This man who works construction, who's built half the houses in the Riverside neighborhood with his own hands, who looks like he could bench press a truck, teared up at the thought of becoming a grandfather again. He spent the next 2 hours sketching designs for a crib he wants to build, asking Clara about her preferences for wood stain and hardware, planning a piece of furniture that will become a family heirloom. Elena immediately started planning, but not in the controlling, overwhelming way that some mothers-in-law do. She asked what we needed, what we wanted help with, how she could support Clara through the pregnancy without overstepping. When Clara mentioned that morning sickness was making it hard to cook, Elena started showing up twice a week with containers of mild, easy-to-digest meals. Not because Clara asked her to, but because that's what you do for family. You anticipate needs and meet them without being asked. That Maria's kids have already appointed themselves the baby's official welcome committee. They're making drawings for the nursery, practicing their gentle touches on dolls, and debating whether they want their new cousin to be a boy or a girl. 10-year-old Sophia has announced that she's going to teach the baby Spanish first, then English, because babies are smarter when they know more words. Last weekend, when Clara was feeling exhausted and overwhelmed by all the pregnancy symptoms, Elena organized an impromptu family gathering. Not to make a big deal about anything, not to hover or offer unwanted advice, but just to surround Clara with love and laughter and the kind of support that makes you remember why having a baby is such a beautiful thing. The men worked on Roberto's latest project while the women sat on the porch, talking about everything and nothing, and Clara fell asleep in her mom's lap like she was still a little girl. When she woke up an hour later, refreshed and smiling, Elena just brushed her hair out of her face and said, "Growing a baby is hard work, Mija. Rest whenever you need to." That's what family looks like. Not competition, not judgment, not constant comparisons or subtle digs disguised as concern. Just love, freely given, no strings attached, no conditions to meet. When our baby is born in April, they'll enter a world where they're already celebrated, already loved, already welcomed with open arms. Elena's already cleared out the spare room for when we need help those first few weeks. Roberto's building toys along with the crib. Maria's kids are planning elaborate ceremonies to introduce their cousin to all their favorite games and hiding spots. Our child will grow up knowing what it feels like to be part of a family that chooses love over control, acceptance over perfection, joy over judgment. They'll have cousins who genuinely care about them, grandparents who see them as a blessing instead of a project, aunts and uncles who celebrate their achievements without comparing them to anyone else's. That's the family our baby is being born into. That's the love they'll know from day one. And that's exactly why none of you were invited to be part of our beginning. Because some things are too precious to risk, and our child's sense of worth is one of them. You know what? I'm done here. Not just with this conversation, not just with this dinner, but with this whole charade of pretending we're a functional family when we're really just a collection of people who happen to share some DNA and a mailing address for holiday cards. That I push my chair back from the table, the legs scraping against Mom's precious hardwood floors. The same floors she spent 3 hours lecturing the cleaning lady about last month, because God forbid there should be a single scuff mark in her perfect house. The sound cuts through the silence like a knife, and suddenly everyone's looking at me with expressions ranging from panic to confusion to what might actually be desperation. Good. Let them panic. Let them sit with the discomfort of realizing that their favorite emotional punching bag just grew a spine and decided he doesn't need their approval anymore. Where are you going? Mom asks, and there's this note in her voice I've never heard before. Not the usual dismissive tone she uses when she's barely tolerating my presence. Not the fake sweetness she puts on when she wants something from me, but something that almost sounds like fear, like maybe she's finally realizing that treating your own son like garbage for 32 years might have consequences. Home, I say simply, standing up and straightening my jacket. To my wife, to my real family, to people who actually give a damn about my happiness. The broken picture frame is still lying at Michael's feet, glass scattered across the floor like the shattered remains of their carefully constructed narrative about my sad, lonely existence. It's funny how one little truth bomb can destroy years of lies, isn't it? All those times they painted me as the pathetic bachelor who couldn't keep a woman, all those subtle digs about my inability to build lasting relationships, all those knowing looks they shared when they thought I wasn't paying attention, all of it reduced to broken glass and wounded pride. Michael finally finds his voice, though it comes out hoarse and uncertain. You can't just drop this on us and leave. We need to talk about this. We need to figure out how to move forward. Move forward? Oh, that's rich. Now he wants to move forward. Not 4 years ago when I could have used some support after my divorce. Not 3 years ago when I was rebuilding my life from scratch. Not 2 years ago when I was falling in love with an incredible woman who deserved to be celebrated, not hidden. Now, when he's finally realized that his position as the family golden boy might not be as secure as he thought. Move forward. I laugh, and it comes out sharper than I intended. Brother, I've been moving forward for 4 years. You're the ones who've been standing still, too busy congratulating yourselves on your superiority to notice that the world kept spinning without your permission. Dad clears his throat, that authoritative sound he's been using to command attention since I was old enough to walk. Son, I think we all need to take a step back here. There's obviously been some miscommunication over the years. Miscommunication. That's what he's calling it. Not decades of emotional neglect, not years of treating me like a second-class citizen in my own family, not the systematic destruction of my self-worth that started when I was too young to defend myself. Just a simple miscommunication, like we accidentally got our wires crossed about whose birthday party to attend. There's been no miscommunication, Dad. You've all been crystal clear about where I stand in this family hierarchy. The only difference is that now I don't care anymore. Julie has been quiet through most of this, but now she speaks up, her voice small and uncertain. Danny, we didn't know. About Clara, about the baby, about any of it. If we had known. If you had known what? You would have been happy for me. You would have supported my choices. You would have welcomed my wife with open arms and celebrated the fact that I'd found love again. I shake my head. Julia, we both know that's not true. You would have done exactly what you always do. Found reasons why it wasn't good enough, why she wasn't good enough, why I wasn't good enough. The truth of that statement hangs in the air like smoke, and nobody can argue with it because they all know it's accurate. They would have dissected Clara's background, criticized her career choice, questioned our financial readiness for marriage and children, and generally made our happiness about their opinions and expectations. But here's the thing that's really beautiful about this moment. Their opinions don't matter anymore. For the first time in my adult life, I'm standing in this room as someone who doesn't need their validation, doesn't crave their approval, doesn't give a shit whether they think I'm making the right choices, that I'm a husband. I'm going to be a father. I'm loved, respected, and valued by people who actually matter. And none of that has anything to do with them. I reach into my jacket pocket and pull out the card Clara insisted I bring. Because even after I told her about my family's greatest hits collection of emotional abuse, she still believes people can change. She still thinks there's hope for reconciliation, for healing, for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they'll surprise us both and choose love over ego. I set the card on the table next to Mom's centerpiece, right where everyone can see it. Our address, I explain. Clara thinks people can change. She believes in second chances, in the possibility that families can learn to love each other properly. So I'm giving you one chance. One opportunity to be part of our lives, to know your grandchild, to prove that you're capable of being the family you should have been all along. Mom reaches for the card with shaking fingers, and I notice her nail polish is chipped, a tiny imperfection in her usually flawless presentation that somehow makes her seem more human, more vulnerable. But I continue, and my voice is steady, calm, final. I won't beg for your love anymore. I won't spend my time trying to earn something that should have been freely given. I won't subject my wife or my child to the kind of conditional acceptance that made my childhood a constant audition for affection. I look around the table one more time, taking in their faces, shocked, confused, some of them beginning to understand the magnitude of what they've lost through their own choices. If you want to be part of our lives, you're welcome. But you'll be joining our family, not the other way around. You'll respect my wife, celebrate our child, and treat us like the family we are. No more competitions, no more comparisons, no more subtle digs disguised as concern. I head toward the door, my footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. And if you can't do that, I call over my shoulder without turning around. Then enjoy your perfectly arranged dinner parties and your status updates about successful children. Because that's all you'll have left. The cold night air hits my face as I step outside, and it feels like freedom. The drive home takes exactly 43 minutes, and every single mile feels like I'm shedding another layer of the suffocating expectations that have been weighing me down for 3 decades. By the time I pull into our driveway, our modest, perfectly imperfect driveway with the crack down the middle that we keep meaning to fix but never quite get around to, I feel lighter than I have in years. Our house isn't much to look at from the outside. It's a small 2-bedroom Craftsman that's probably worth half of what Michael paid for his McMansion in the suburbs, with paint that could use a fresh coat and a front porch that sags just slightly on the left side. But as I sit in my car for a moment, looking at the warm yellow lights spilling out of our living room window, I realize I've never been prouder of anything in my entire life. That light means Clara's home, probably curled up on our secondhand couch with a stack of papers to grade and a mug of the decaf coffee she's been pretending tastes just as good as the real thing since we found out about the baby. It means Buster, our ridiculous golden retriever mix, is probably sprawled across her feet, making it impossible for her to move, but too cute to disturb. It means I'm about to walk into a space where I'm not just tolerated or endured, but genuinely wanted. The front door opens before I even reach the porch steps, and there she is. Clara, in her favorite pregnancy pajamas, the ones with the little cartoon avocados that say, "Holy guacamole, we're having a baby." Her hair piled up in a messy bun, her face lit up with that smile that still makes my chest tight with the sheer impossibility of being this lucky. "How'd it go?" she asks, though I can tell from her expression that she already knows. Clara has this uncanny ability to read my face like it's her favorite book, and right now, I'm probably broadcasting relief and exhaustion in equal measure. Exactly like you'd expect, I say, pulling her into my arms and breathing in the scent of her shampoo, something vanilla and warm that always makes me think of home, but also better than I hoped. She pulls back to study my face, her hands resting on my chest. "Better how?" I told them everything. About us, about the wedding, about the baby. I didn't ask for their permission or their approval. I just told them the truth and walked away. Her smile could power half the city. "I'm proud of you." And the thing is, I can tell she means it. Not the way my family used to say they were proud. With conditions and qualifications and subtle hints about how I could do even better next time. But genuinely, completely proud of me for finally standing up for myself and for us that we settle onto the couch. Clara immediately curling into my side, while Buster performs his nightly routine of trying to fit his 70-pound body onto our laps like he's still the 8-week-old puppy we adopted 3 years ago. The coffee table is covered with Clara's work, lesson plans for next week's unit on community helpers, a stack of math tests that need grading, and what looks like the beginnings of a Mother's Day project involving far too much glitter. "Tell me everything," she says, and so I do. I tell her about Michael's smug comment, about the moment I finally snapped, about the beautiful silence that followed my announcement. I tell her about the broken picture frame, about Mom's tears, about Dad's confusion, about the card I left with our address. Clara listens without interrupting, occasionally making little sounds of sympathy or satisfaction depending on which part of the story I'm telling. When I get to the part about describing our wedding, she gets teary-eyed. When I tell her about revealing the pregnancy, she actually laughs out loud. "I wish I could have seen their faces," she says, "especially when you told them about the baby. Your parents called while I was driving home," I say, pulling out my phone to show her the missed call. "Probably wanting to know if we need anything for the nursery, or if you're feeling okay, or if there's some new way they can spoil their future grandchild." The contrast isn't lost on either of us. While my family spent the evening processing the shocking news that I'm capable of happiness, Clara's family is probably planning baby showers and researching the best organic baby food recipes and arguing about whether our child should learn Spanish or English first. "Roberto finished the crib today," Clara says, settling deeper into my arms. "He sent pictures. It's beautiful. You're going to cry when you see it." She's probably right. Roberto has been working on this crib for 2 months, hand-selecting every piece of wood, sanding each rail to perfect smoothness, creating something that will be an heirloom instead of just furniture. The man barely knows me, but he's putting more love and effort into welcoming our child than my own family has put into our relationship in 32 years. "Mama wants to throw us a baby shower," Clara continues. "Nothing fancy, just family and friends in the backyard." She's already planning the menu. I think about Elena's baby shower, probably involving 3 different kinds of tamales, Roberto's mariachi friends providing music, and enough laughter to be heard 3 blocks away. Compared to the sterile, Pinterest-perfect events my family would organize if they were involved. The kind where everything is coordinated and tasteful and nobody actually has any fun. Sounds perfect, I say, and I mean it, that we sit in comfortable silence for a while, watching Buster chase dream squirrels in his sleep, listening to the sounds of our neighborhood settling in for the night. This is what peace feels like, I realize. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of genuine love and acceptance. "Do you think they'll reach out?" Clara asks eventually. "Your family, I mean. Do you think they'll use the address?" I consider this, thinking about the expressions on their faces when I left, the way Mom clutched that card like it was a lifeline. Maybe, probably, but it won't be the same as before. "What do you mean?" "Before tonight, I was always trying to earn their love, always hoping that if I just worked hard enough or achieved enough or became successful enough, they'd finally see me as worthy of their attention. But now, if they want to be part of our lives, they have to earn that privilege. They have to prove they can love us without conditions." Clara's hand finds mine, our fingers interlacing automatically. "And if they can't?" I look around our small living room, taking in the framed photos from our wedding day, the bookshelves filled with Clara's teaching resources and my mystery novels, the corner where we've already started accumulating baby books and tiny clothes. I think about the life we've built together, the family we're creating, the love that fills every corner of this modest house. Then we'll be just fine without them, I say, and for the first time in my life, I know that's absolutely true. Our baby will be born into this, into love without conditions, acceptance without qualifications, family that chooses joy over judgment. And that's the greatest gift we could possibly give them. That's enough. We're enough. This is home.